Amen. Please be seated. I love this gospel. Come and have breakfast. That's what Jesus says to Peter and his friends, as he, now fully clothed and soaking wet, walks ashore while his friends are the ones who haul in the multitude of fish that they've caught. Come and have breakfast. It's such an ordinary invitation. And you'll hear one of our vestry members make a similar invitation during our announcement today. Come down, have a cup of coffee, sit down, have something to eat or drink. Come and have breakfast. Jesus, while he can be mysterious or even confusing in the parables that he tells and what he says is to come, here on the beach, his message is simple. But before that invitation to come and have breakfast, is so much more. For example, let's talk about the shore that Jesus is sitting on. The Sea of Tiberias is another name for the Sea of Galilee, which is also called the Lake of Gennesaret. They're referred to all different ways, but they are actually all the same place. The Sea of Tiberias, Sea of Galilee, Lake of Gennesaret is not a particularly large body of water. It's only about 13 miles across and 8 miles wide. And it's located in Capernaum in northern Israel, where most of Jesus' public ministry takes place before he goes to Jerusalem. This is the body of water on which Jesus walks. It's also on the banks of this body of water where Jesus blesses bread and fish and feeds a multitude of hungry people. Upon this sea is where the disciples rock and roll in a wild storm, and where Jesus, in a display of his relationship to God, he's asleep. Remember this? He's asleep in the boat, and then he calms the sea. Same sea. And perhaps most important for us to notice today, a day when we are going to return to the baptismal font to renew our covenant with God and ourselves and each other. The shores of this sea are where Jesus actually calls his first followers. This is where they are simply carrying on with their lives, their livelihoods, fishing as a trade to feed their families, themselves, and their communities. They're just living. One might imagine that they are longing for the promises of God. And maybe Jesus, when he first called the disciples, offered that simple phrase then too, some 3 years prior. Come and have breakfast. Now, in the aftermath of Jesus' death and 2 previous resurrection sightings, Simon Peter, Nathanael, Thomas, and some others returned to this very shore. And initially, Peter seems quite agitated, confused, not quite sure what to do. Maybe he's still wrestling with how he indeed did deny his friend 3 times in the time of his trial. He tells his friends, as if throwing up his hands in resignation, I'm going fishing. And he returns to the sea where he once sat with Jesus, where he boldly stepped out of a boat to walk with Jesus on the water, but sank and was rescued. He returns to the seashore where he helped to feed multitudes in a miraculous appearance of abundant bread and fish, also on the charcoal grill this morning. And even in scant times, they were really feeding abundantly. He returns to the sea from which he was called to cast aside his fishing net and strap on his sandals and follow this man who claimed to be the revelation of God. The disciples join Peter and they fish all night, but they catch nothing because, of course, they're looking at this in the wrong way. Unsure and unsteady during this transition period, after the death of Jesus, before his full ascension back to God, they've gone back to their old ways, haven't they? They've returned to the beginning, but they haven't done it new, in a new way. They've just gone back to their old ways. So of course they can't catch any fish. They're not fishermen anymore. Their lives changed the day they cast aside their nets, to say nothing of their 3 years of ministry and friendship and community with Jesus that has changed them. Meanwhile, the risen Christ shows up on the shore and nobody notices. So Jesus calls out to them, just try the other side of the boat. It's very simple. It's only after they've caught quite a haul of fish when the beloved disciple, who tradition suggests is John, the younger brother of James, cries out, "It's him, it's Jesus." And then the scene that tends to make us laugh. Peter, who's fishing naked, or at least with very little clothes on, cannot wait until the boat comes ashore to be near Jesus. And so he throws his clothes back on and jumps into the sea, leaving the work of hauling the fish to his friends, which is perhaps a comment from John on what he really thinks of Peter and his leadership. I've said this before, I really think that John is just super annoyed with Peter all the time. "Come and have breakfast," Jesus says to them. "Come and have breakfast." And they join him for some fish and bread, reminiscent of what they once shared widely with multitudes, but now share intimately around a warming fire. I imagine it felt so familiar that no one dared to ask, "Who are you?" It was clear in that meal shared who they were sitting with. In this strange story, and maybe initially, it's hard to understand what's happening here, but there's a couple things to pay attention to this morning. It strikes me that Peter goes back to where it all started, well before miraculous feedings and Last Suppers, well before healings and exorcisms and the parables, well before a cross and an empty tomb. Sometimes when we don't know where we are or what we're doing in life, it helps to go back to the beginning, to recalibrate, to get our bearings, to remind ourselves of who we are and how we've changed. Maybe Peter needed to do what felt easy to him, what he still knew even after 3 years on the road with Jesus, which he still kind of knew in his bones, fishing. Only something had indeed changed because he can't catch anything. Now, years prior, Jesus had called to Peter right on these shores and said to him that he was going to make him a fisher of men. And returning to the sea, maybe Peter just needed to recount that story and to hold those nets in his hands again, to feel the cool water on his feet, the sun on his bare chest, to recall those memories and be reminded of what he said yes to in the first place. That Jesus shows up again on these same shores is not really a bookend to that calling, as it is the heading of a new chapter. Because Jesus says a few more things to Peter this time. First, come and have breakfast. Sit down and be fed, but don't get too cozy. The reading moves on from there. Don't get too cozy. It doesn't end here on these shores. You have to keep feeding the people. Feed my sheep. Tend to my sheep. This is lifelong work, so come on, let's get started. For us on this third Sunday of Easter, when we have the privilege of welcoming another sheep into our fold at our 10 a.m. service, we also are going to return to our beginnings. It's a baptismal community. We will return to the font and renew our covenant as Andrew's parents, as Andrew Buffington, as his parents and godparents will make a covenant on behalf of him, a covenant to do the lifelong work of feeding God's sheep, of tending to God's sheep, and following Jesus. Now, in our baptismal covenant, we reaffirm the promises that we make to one another, to ourselves, and to God. And we also, like Peter, let those cool waters of our beginnings, our starting place for all things in the church, wash over us. And we come and have breakfast. In our Eucharistic meal, yes, of course, but actually in all of this that we do here on Sunday, and simply coming together, we are fed in word and sacrament, food for the journey, so we too, like Peter, like the disciples, can heed Jesus' words and feed my sheep, tend to my sheep. Are we ready to go dive back in again? Amen.